What is up, YouTube? We are back at it once again, jamming away on this stupid Ironhead. I did not have the gasket, so I had to run up to the indie shop, grab one of those. He had one for me. Long drive for a $2-3 piece of paper, but needed that. I got about 5 or 6 of them, all for 1,000 cc's, not a 900. So, gonna button up the front cylinder. I'm not gonna film all of that just because I did that the other day. Stud is repaired. I did a helicoil to a helicoil. Cranked it in, it's grabbing okay, so we're gonna rip that one down. Hopefully everything works out on that side. I got the cam cover, I pulled out the sprocket cover. I had a 23 tooth sprocket on here. Since this one is gonna stay mechanical drum, I bumped that up to a 24. I can't really go too much bigger because it is a kickstart. So ideally the goal for tonight is get the front cylinder back on. I also rebuilt the other head here. Not the rockers, but the head is done, so both of these are ready to go back on. The goal tonight is to get the heads reassembled, get the cylinders back on, and load up the rocker boxes. So we'll dive into the rockers once I get the rest of this stuff done, and then I can bolt the rockers to the head because they all need to be one piece when I put them back into the frame. From there, we will keep kind of jamming away. Transmission is in. And now it's just a matter of the primary stuff. I don't have the outer cover, but I don't need that, and I have a ton of stuff to do prior to that, so I don't know where to start or end. Yeah, let's do the rockers. Well, lo and behold, I just tried putting the cylinders back on, well, the gasket for the cylinders. Wrong one. It's the exact same one that I have about 12 of. Mistakes happen. Just kind of a disappointment. I was all excited to get that cylinder back together today. So instead, we are going to keep jamming away on these rockers. Now, all I did on these was take these apart. This is all cleaned up. Everything's recoated. Here's the chrome ones. They used to be chrome. You can still see some of the pitting. So from the powder coating perspective, I had no intention of these being mint. However, one uniform color as opposed to rust makes quite a world of difference. There's still some machining or degreasing oil on here, so it will be a nice even satin black finish. And then we are going to slap these back together with all the same parts. I will go ahead and clean up some of these gaskets and replace these O-rings while we're at it. And I need to clean up this, because if I try and polish the chrome on here after, it's going to scratch the powder around it. So I got to do a quick but a quick steel wool and polish on the outside of this, get this cleaned up, and slap these back in. Much better. A little bit of love on there. Didn't take very long. This is what it looked like. So these are going to be as good as the metal is underneath them once I hit them with some polish, but disassemble the shaft. I'll go through that in a minute. I'm going to do this on the next 3, and then we will slap them back together. Not very exciting, but a little bit of Mother's Mag aluminum polish and steel wool. I think this is 00. I'm not trying to go too crazy or scratch the chrome. Just get a nice little luster back on here. I'm just about out of polish. Definitely need to restock. I'm running low on polish. I'm running low on assembly lube. Been working on too many things and cleaning up too much stuff. But this is the important part. This little bit now goes a long way on the end of the rebuild. Like I said, we're not going for show finish on these at all. I'm okay with that. Did not take the O-rings off yet, but that's fine. We'll get to those next. So now, actually, I'm only going to do 2 at a time, so I keep everything organized. So we'll come back to these 2 in a minute. But here are the 2 that we are going to throw back together. So let me find the O-rings, and then we can start slapping this back in. Okay, so somewhere in this bag of O-rings that just came in the gym's kit are the ones that we need for this. I also want to find the lifter block gaskets, because we're going to need to do those today too. It's an add-on. 1, 2, 3. Where's number 4? 4. So that's these ones here. Okay. Grab a pick for this. Depending on how old or dry rotted these are, they may come out, they may not. This one's actually spinning okay. Ooh, stabbed myself. This was my straight pick at one point, until I decided to use it as a punch yesterday. Grab another one. It's a little bit better shape. Unfortunately, my small picks that I usually use for this are not here. So, old one's out, new O-ring's going to go on. With the O-rings, you don't want to roll these completely. Well, essentially, you're going to roll this into place. And walk these around. Like so. So fresh O-ring seal on here. And these should compress once they actually go back in a little bit. This one I just took out, super squared off. Got it back up here. I don't know what I was thinking here. Said I didn't hear. That's not where the O-ring goes. It goes up top. So roll it onto here. And then what I like to do is kind of walk this O-ring around a ton, like so, and then spin it. And when you spin it, it'll kind of unwind itself, as long as it's free floating in that groove, just like that. Gonna need a little bit of grease and oil on this. I go a little grease heavy today, only because I am running very low on assembly lube, especially this outer edge. Give it a little bit of grease to help slip these back together. Now we have our rocker shaft here, and how this is going to work is all of these parts need to get turned around. This side's going to ride in your push rod, so I actually have these backwards right now. This side of the rocker, with that little detent here, is for the push rod. This side's for the valve. So this will drop into the housing, or the rocker cover. Let's see if I can give you guys a better view. So with everything out, this comes off. This will drop in here like that. Spring, washer are going to go in between these. Rocker shaft comes through here. We have a spring and a washer. It'll drop in here. Like that. Then we got a washer and the acorn nut for the other side. Now, brand new O-ring. It is going to be kind of a tight fit. Just like that. Quick little love tap with the dead blow. Pounds that right in. And we got our nut and our acorn on the outside. This will get threaded down. And there we have it. One done. Same thing on the other shaft. I just cut the old O-ring out. So we got the brand new O-ring here. And drop this down. This will slide up and over. And like I said, you don't want to catch this on a sharp edge. But essentially we're going to get it around and unroll it. Now we need to go up one more ring. I'm not using a pick to pry on this, but now it's kind of unrolled there. And we're going to put a little bit of pressure and kind of lift this. You see this section right here where the O-ring's kind of coming up. Just keep rolling this around, spinning it in this bore until that flat spot actually flattens out. Just like that. And now that bubble is gone. The bulge is gone. That bulge usually gets there from the O-ring trying to lock itself in place. And take some grease. Just like that. Make sure that O-ring's greased. Will make it much easier on assembly. Same thing here. Did not go through and degrease or clean up any of the stuff on the actual rocker shafts for this. I'm just going to put a tiny bit of grease on here right now. So. And wipe my hands off. And we'll do the same thing again. Again, this goes on the push rod, which means it's going to drop in this way. Spring and washer. Rocker shaft goes in. Spring, washer, like so. And then some love taps. Oh, one shot. Nice. That grease is really going to help drop that O-ring into these. So there we go. I still got to clean up these acorn nuts. We're not going to do that right now though. But now we got our rocker box loaded up. No drag. Obviously they're not tightened down yet, but make sure everything's spinning free. You don't want any binding. Wipe off your excess grease if you care enough. This whole thing's going to get cleaned up later on anyway. So I'm going to do the same thing on the other one. I'm not going to... I really don't want to film the other one. I don't want to bore you guys. Same exact thing. You got your two sides. The big thing to just remember when you're dropping these back in, valve, push rod, valve, push rod. Don't mix and match those. You'll be able to figure it out from there. If I was smarter, I would have done this before I just dropped the rockers back in, but taking a carbide here. The chrome on these were pretty pitted on the outside, but they're also kind of pitted here. When they chromed this, they chromed the entire inside of this as well. So I'm just giving this a quick little scrape, trying to knock off some of the flaky chrome. Then I get to re-clean the inside of this. So I'll hit this with compressed air now, blow those out, but should be good enough to start gluing this back on this one. But while I'm at it, since I remembered, hindsight is 20/20, they say. But we're just going to take this carbide and trimming that edge of powder. Normally I do this with a file. On these I don't really want to file around because I'll nick all the powder here. But just one quick little pass with this carbide scraper around that outside edge. We'll do the same thing. There. There we go. So again, now I'll blow these both out with compressed air. Alright, same deal on this. Well, this is going to be time-lapsed on the second one, but I will show you one more time. Time-lapse this real quick, speed it up. I went into detail on the last one, figure it out from there. Alright, so I grabbed the rear head. I can't do the front. Well, I can assemble the heads. That's not really that big of a deal now that these are in. These are still loose, so I gotta tighten up these 9/16 ones, but I can do that now. I can do that in the bike later. Doesn't really matter. But since these heads are all powder coated, I do have a little bit of glue left on here, and we're just going to use the carbide instead of filing across them. All I'm doing is cutting that outer edge where the powder is. You can kind of see that little string. It's not really that much. If you get stuff powder coated, I would recommend doing this on everything in terms of mechanical motor parts, because we do a pretty good job masking everything off and getting everything laid out the way it's supposed to be. But it's powder, so it's always going to build. I mean, paint's going to build up a little bit too. Powder just tends to be a little more stubborn. And then I got a little bit of tape residue still on these heads from when it got baked. But again, this is mine. I know to go through it. For those of you at home that don't have stuff powder coated or aren't powder coating things on a regular basis or know how it works, I'm telling you now, expect a little bit of prep. I mean, it's the same thing if somebody paints a bunch of stuff and you get a bunch of paint in the thread holes and things like that. That's just good practice. It doesn't matter if it's paint or powder in that regard, but good practice to just prep all your motor parts. You want everything to go together smooth, and even when you do that, like I did, it can still bite you in the ass. Not that I did anything wrong there, it's just problems will come up along the way, so figure out how to deal with them as they come up. But this one is good to go now on the face here. I already did that on the top. So essentially what we're going to do now is lay out the rear rocker bar. Oh, I'm going to have to figure out the oil line scenario on this. Yeah. Murdered out. Yay. We'll be right back. Well, here's where we are leaving off on this. Not leaving off, but here's where we're getting started with this. Rockers are done. Started threading in the oil lines. Look at these brand new fancy chrome things. So oil lines will go into the head. I've got to at least get the fittings in. Not the lower collar, but they're two-piece, just standard oil line compression fitting. So you have your 1/8 inch NPT or 1/4 inch. I don't know what the size is off the top of my head. 1/8 or 1/4. I think that's 1/8 inch. 1/8 inch NPT threads into the head. And you have open sleeve on this side. Gasket, big fat O-ring, and compression fitting. That's how that'll thread in. So that one, this one's already in, but this will go something like that. Line presses in before you tighten that nut down. When you tighten the nut down, O-ring expands, and that locks all of those down. But I never prepped these heads for reassembly, so we're just going to go through and chase all of these threads. 7/16 on the socket, so it's a 5/16 fine thread here. Just rip these down. Like so. Just chase all these threads. I did plug these threads. This was all masked off when we coated them. However, when you're doing powder coating or paint, if you don't plug the back side, you will get a little bit of binding or powder overflow or paint overflow into the thread. That's what we're trying to fix right now. So make sure your drill's going the right way. I'm just using the electric impact right now. And see if, how well does that show up on camera? If you look real close on this, all the sand and powder residue. That's why I chase every thread before I start assembling a motor again. So we'll do that on every one of these. It's redundant and boring. This will either be time-lapsed or edited. I don't know yet. Let me have a ton of cleanup to do on here, so chase the threads first, and then I'll blow all this off with compressed air again. And then ideally the goal is to get rear cylinder mounted and on. Front cylinder is going to have to wait because I got the wrong gasket, like I said. But that'll be a good ending point for tonight. Okay, so here's the problem when you're doing work on stuff that other people have already worked on at some point in time. This threads in perfectly fine. The threads are tapped correctly, everything else works. I'm not fighting any sort of pressure or cross-threading or anything like that. So, look, one finger, nice, easy, coming down, threading in the way it's supposed to. All is wonderful in the world. We'll seat this. I do have a little bit of thread sealer on here, but we'll seat that one right in the hole where it's supposed to go. Everything's good until you pick it up and look at how crooked this is. It's still going to work, but that should be flush. Hopefully you guys can see that. It's definitely kicked back to the left side. Here's what it is. I'm not going to re-drill and try and helicoil an oil pressure fitting for the sake of doing that, but that's where it's at. On this side is the oil line we need to drop in. So I'm going to rotate the frame just a hair, give myself a bit more room. Grab another one of these fancy brand new chrome fittings. Little thread sealer. I'm going to pull the collar off right now. So I'm only dealing with the lower section. Grab my little 1/4 inch wrench. Just like so. Drop this right into the cylinder or case. You do not have to Hulk these down by any means. It's just an oil line. But what we do want to do is make sure that, one, you have thread sealer on them, so oil's not leaking like crazy, and you want to snug them up. Now, the fun part of this adventure, brand new chrome oil line, brand new O-ring. I'm going to drop this down over the O-ring, slide it down, flip it over, do the same thing on the other side, like so. Oh, I screwed up. $1 to whoever can tell me what I did wrong. You can't put the O-rings on before you put the collar. So, this fitting first, the directional. O-ring sits on the inside of the fitting. This slides on, and then your O-ring, squared off O-ring, but O-ring nonetheless, like so. And then your O-ring's going to sit right there. This is going to compress it and stop any leaks. Same thing on this side. We'll flip it over, drop your fitting, drop your O-ring, slide it down. I like to give myself a good amount of room to work, so I'll just leave these floating now. They're kind of fixed. Then we can throw the head on. Ish. make sure you know what you're looking for. In this scenario, or in this case, intake has the machined O-ring groove here, so make sure the intakes are going forward. Heads are down, or heads completely assembled with the rocker boxes. We are good on that part. This is just going to kind of spin and free float. We're going to drop this oil line in here, and I'm going to kind of split the difference on the gap between these two. It's not going to be crazy huge, but if I can get this kind of started here, I'm not doing a final torque or anything on this, I'm just getting them close. Get a couple threads there, pull this up, a couple threads here. Just like that. Now you have a fixed oil line. I know the head's floating and moving and doing all sorts of crazy things. Grab a head bolt or two. I'm not doing the final assembly on the heads right now, so I'm literally just going to drop these two in. And try and get them to line up in the cylinders. Ooh, my gasket moved. What you don't want to happen, you want everything to go together nice and smoothly. It's not real life. So now, move my oil line, but get it close. So in this case, I dropped the head in, I got the cylinder to line up where it needs to be. However, now my oil line doesn't want to line up. You don't have to put these together before you mount the head. That's more of a personal preference for me. We're a ways off on this one. But I like kind of trying to split the difference just so I get a better sense of where everything's at. So if we come over here, here's the head bolts. There's one here. Obviously that's the rocker bolt. Don't expect everything to bolt together perfectly, but I'm just doing a rough, quick mock-up. I want to make sure that the head bolts are threading in to the cylinder, and I'm going to start on these two because those ones are kind of tedious. You got to get those two torqued down before you actually crank down on your, or before you put your push rods in. But in this case, that's enough to at least hold it roughly in place. And I don't like doing a final torque on cylinder heads until I get the actual intake hooked up, because there's not much, but a little bit of pivot room. And I like to clock everything to the point where it's gonna be the best seal for the intake. So I will tighten down the cylinder heads and the base cylinders according to what the best fitment on the O-rings for the cylinders are. And that's pretty much where we're going to leave off for this video. I know nothing's final finished, but this is kind of what we're looking at. I did find the gaskets for the lifters, so that's going to be a tomorrow thing. We'll be out here all day tomorrow jamming away, so tons more videos coming your way. I'm going to section them as best I can for individual jobs for those of you that are doing this for the first time. I'm really bad at this whole turn the camera around and look at me and talk thing, but here's roughly where we're at. I am waiting on base gasket for the front, then we can start putting that together. I think this is going to be a nice looking motor. If it looks different in the camera on the rocker and the cylinder, it's because it should. It looks way more different in person. This is a satin black, this is a sheen black, and then the frame is a super high gloss with an extra clear. Didn't want to load up the cylinders because I don't think it's necessary. But I did want to contrast that top rocker area and the cam chest with a little bit of a flatter color. Primary is the same color as the top here. Tomorrow we will be back out here jamming away. I should have the base gasket for the front cylinder and maybe lay out the intake even before I coat that. Super rusty, super crusty, stock steel one. No S&S aluminum ones. I think I have 2 or 3 of these. Maybe I'll put an S&S one on. I haven't decided yet. If not, the steel one's going to get coated black before I do the final torque and assembly on the jugs. Transmission's in, transmission's loaded, everything is good to go. Spin's free, shift's fine. But that rear cylinder is why I've been waiting to put the oil tank and a lot of these extra parts back on the bike. So hit that like button, please. We're trying to hit that 800 mark. Tons of new shirts coming your way. The Wrenching Wrecked ones, I got one design for that. We have a couple for the shop that I think are pretty cool. JTS Coatings and Cycles, check that out. I'm going to start a YouTube page at some point or another, or channel, I guess. Channel is how YouTube does it. I don't know. But that's where we're at. Thanks for watching. We'll catch you on the next one.